The bank has closed our account and they seized all the money that was in the account.
We actually served a search warrant on their condo in Brentwood, and at first they didn't open the door.
Police search warrant, open up!
Police, open up! Who thinks twice about carefully using their credit card, especially when losses due to fraud are generally insured by the credit card company itself? Well, if it's happened to you, you know that it can be quite an ordeal just to get through the reversing of the transaction, and you might not even notice the theft if you're not checking your card statements diligently. Well, that's what fraudsters are actually counting on, and they're stealing over $1 billion of our money every year. In this episode, we're going to show you how criminals use everyday places like gas stations and restaurants to steal your credit card information and then go on a spending spree at your expense.
Police search warrant, open up!
Police, open up!
I never suspected that the restaurant did it.
Two individuals decided to start an identity theft ring. And what they did was they decided to use waiters at places that you and I go to. And they preyed on people that are just eating dinner.
I had stopped at the grocery store on my way home from work, and I attempted to use my card to pay for the groceries, and the card didn't go through. I had had lunch at a restaurant. When they took my card to pay for the dinner, they went and scanned it twice.
And once they had the PIN that opened the victim account, they were able to then take all the money out of it.
What we have here is evidence that was recovered from the execution of the search warrant on the home of the main suspects. This is an example of a skimmer that was given to one of the servers, and the server would place this in their apron. And once the customer at the restaurant would give the ATM debit card as a form of payment to the server would go to the back of the restaurant, would take the ATM debit card, and would just place it in, wait for the beep, and they would pull it out, and their information was then captured onto the skimmer.
Pretty upscale restaurant, so I just didn't think anything like that would happen.
They had software which they would take their own ATM debit card and put the victim's information on the back. They would then go into the bank with their own ATM debit cards and ask for a PIN change.
They did go to the bank, deposited a check, and then withdrew money from the check.
They were making counterfeit checks, and they would write the victim's name on the check.
They then recruited very attractive women to go into the banks to inflate the balances with these counterfeit checks. And then they themselves or these runners would use the ATM debit cards that they created to withdraw all the money.
I looked at my account, and about $8,000 it was overrun.
Taking elaborate trips, they're living very high and owning lots of property and lots of nice clothes and cars. They actually lived in Santa Monica in a beautiful beachfront condominium where they lived off of everybody else's money for about a year.
We actually served a search warrant on their condo in Brentwood, and at first they didn't open the door.
What do we got?
One room, 12 guys, split down the middle, no other entrance.
We did end up having to bust the door down, and they were shocked.
Police search warrant, open up!
Police, open up!
two ringleaders, Matuzovic and Messagru, were from France. They came here and decided to prey on American victims and live the American dream through crime. We were able to bring money laundering charges that were brought by the IRS. We were able to bring mail fraud charges that were brought by the United States Postal Inspection Service. And we were able to look at their immigration status since they're from France because ICE was involved. We have two fugitives in the case. One, Shannon Camille Smith. The other is Yassine Albouri, who is a French national who is out of the country and has never been brought to justice. Unfortunately, in the United States Attorney's Office, we are often presented with fraud cases such as this with skimming devices. Therefore, the public needs to be put on notice that when they use their credit cards or debit cards, they need to be aware of where they're using it and to keep track of their account information.
In this case, individual customers were the victims. They don't know what's going on, and they have to deal with going to the bank, proving to the bank that they weren't the ones that did this.
Everything stands still because then you start getting, your bills become due and you can't pay them because you have no access to your account.
Your accounts are available, so you can see to make sure that nobody's having fraudulent charges or taking advantage of your credit cards by looking at your statements online or calling your bank.
A new customer going into the bank should ask the bank agent or whatever they're called, should ask several questions before you put your money in the bank so that your money is secure and that if something does happen, how are they going to protect you?
I referred to Michael Holliday as a pickpocket in an Armani suit. With Michael Holliday, it's as if they took every aspect of investment fraud and put it into one personality. That is, that he used every tool in the book to become successful. Somewhere along the line, Holliday got big plans to become a big city success with lots of money and lots of power, so naturally he gravitated to Bay Street. He went up and down Bay Street for a couple of days, literally begging any of the brokerages to take him on. And his first day of work was called Black Monday, the day the stock market plummeted 20%. That's how Michael Holliday's career began, and I've always thought that's a bit of a marker of some sort.
Holliday is the type of person that you would meet on the street who is a very calm, cool, collected individual. Probably one of the most dangerous people out there with respect to these types of crimes.
Yeah. How does a scumbag like Holliday weave such a perfect web of deception so as to suck his victims in so quickly?
One of the things about these fraud artists is they're not great geniuses. Everyone I've looked at, including Holliday, have essentially used very simple devices, all of them built on trust, and this is the important thing to remember.
He was working for one of the major investment dealers. I knew it wasn't a fly-by-night brokerage firm. In my job, I was traveling about 10 or 12 trips a year, so it was very good for me, the amount of business travel I was doing, to have somebody that I could trust. And he explained that because of the fact that I was away so much, that the moves in the market were time sensitive, and because he couldn't always reach me, would I be prepared to give him discretion to trade when he saw it was appropriate. And he would show you on a monthly basis the returns that people were getting. And I did have a friend who also had gone to him as a client and was doing this kind of trading and was very happy with these phenomenal profits that he was making. Like it was like you couldn't miss.
Michael Holliday was earning over $1 million a year in commissions. This was unheard of. He was elevated to the President's Club, which made him one of the top 5% of producers in the organization. This was their shining guy. This was their golden boy. But somebody at the brokerage said, how is he doing this? Because we'd like all our other guys to do it. And one of the board of directors members went to talk to Holliday, came back and said, I can't figure it out. And they said, well, let's leave him alone because $1 million a year is $1 million a year. He would say to clients who called and said, hey, I just got my statement and my account is like 90% of my money is missing. What's happening? And his response would be, oh, they've screwed things up at the computer. Look, I'll find out what it is and I'll give you my personal statement and tell you where you stand. And people would toss away these computerized statements and accept this hand-scrawled statement saying, you didn't actually lose $90,000, you made $40,000. And here it is, and trust me, and they did. And of course, they felt terribly foolish afterwards.
Lo and behold, there's a letter for me from the compliance department of First Marathon to advise that the losses to date were something in excess of $148,000 US.
When he joined the second brokerage, he came with this great record of producing enormous commissions every year, even though nobody could figure out how he was doing it. So he asked for and received a special title. And with this second brokerage, he was named Managing Director, Futures Division. Now, as soon as he proposed certain opportunities, investment opportunities to his clients, opportunities that most people would never buy, it was always backed up by his position as a managing director of the company. People who are involved in these kinds of fraud activities have a very limited horizon. The horizon ends maybe 2 days from now. They're not worrying about how they're going to pay the money back next month, next year, anytime at all. He spent it as fast, or maybe even faster than he made it.
It wasn't long before I guess they had enough complaints from other clients who were getting nervous. And what he was doing was just shifting the money around from one client to another.
That over his period of about 3 or 4 years, he stole something beyond $20 million. And when he was finally caught, there was nothing left.
The worst horror story to me was that his wife's sister had given birth to twins, and they died just shortly after birth. And Michael was going to pay for this sumptuous funeral, and they were buried in Mount Pleasant Cemetery. And then he didn't pay for the burial. So they had to dig up the babies and move them to another cemetery.
It didn't seem to bother him that what he was doing with people's livelihoods and life savings resulting in ruining families, breaking families down, and people considering taking their own lives. There is actually no remorse. Certainly there was none at the trial or at the time of conviction as well. He felt he was victimized even as he's being led out of court.
Interestingly enough, for the first half of his preliminary trial, he was represented by a very high-profile criminal lawyer. The second half, he represented himself because the lawyer simply wouldn't believe him anymore. Now, if your own lawyer doesn't believe you, I mean, what does that tell you? At his preliminary trial, the second half, and at his full criminal trial, which lasted 3 months, Michael Holliday represented Michael Holliday, and the judge bent over backwards to persuade him to ask the questions, to defend himself in an effective manner, because she did not want an appeal to be won. Even at that, he was declared guilty on all the charges. He was sentenced to a total of just under 9 years in prison.
This story is a cautionary tale about how even quick-witted, intelligent people can be snagged into the web of a clever fraudster without even a hint of suspicion that it's happening to them. That is, until it's too late.
At that point, I just felt so stupid and that I'd been taken, and I couldn't believe that it would happen. When I was quite young, about 14, I watched somebody make an arrangement. I was fascinated. And I'm one of the lucky ones, because I said to my mom, I said, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I want to do. When you create something, you stand back and it's like, wow, I did that. That's very satisfying. It was January 2nd, we came into work and I found this email, and it was from Pastor Benjamin. He needed some gift baskets and some wreaths for his church anniversary. I emailed him back and I asked him to call me to make sure that what he wanted was correct.
This fraud basically was perpetrated from Ghana, Africa. There are no jurisdictions on the internet. It's worldwide, it's instant contact, and there are no borders.
Within minutes, he was on the phone.
Hi, Rosanna, how are you? Yeah, okay, so I'm gonna need 300 gift baskets and 300 wreaths.
Because it is a larger order, we do need payment up front, and that wasn't a problem. He sent the payment through with 4 different credit cards. It actually went through our POS, started ordering bounce. So I physically had the money in my bank account. That's when we started ordering baskets and chocolates and wreaths. He actually paid for the shipping charges with credit cards, and then I, in turn, took that money and went to Western Union and shipped the money to his shipping manager. He sent me the money. I went back to Western Union, shipped that over.
Just in Miss Yeoman's case, we would have seen those signs. And the first sign we would have seen after listening to her tell us about this opportunity, you know, for these wreaths to be made, we would have said to her, okay, well, how are you sending this money? How are you getting paid? And once we would have heard the words money transfer, money wire, that would have been a red flag for any person in the BBB office to say, stop, wait a minute.
Since Rosanna thought she was using the so-called pastor's money, she also followed his instructions, no matter how unorthodox, to the letter.
He would pick up the money and he would call me as soon as he picked it up. Thank you very much, I've picked up the money. The next day, he ordered some more, so the shipping charges were more. The next amount was, I believe, around $2,300. The next amount was over $5,000. It was $5,600 or $5,700. Again, he paid me the same routine over and over. My bank manager called me and said, something's really fishy, it's not sitting right with me. I didn't believe him. I thought, no, he's being a great manager, he's just being cautious. I didn't feel that feeling until the next day when I found an email from a gentleman in Amsterdam from ING, which is the credit card company. Basically in the email had said, you've started receiving orders January 1st for large amounts, don't ship them, it's all fraudulent cards.
After the products were purchased and all of the shipping charges and taxes were paid, the total amount that Rosanna was responsible for when it was discovered that the credit cards were stolen, a whopping $44,000.
The secretary? She could be behind that desk.
Randy Drum. What had happened was when Rosanna had realized that she had been victimized, she started to become concerned about any fallout that might come her way. She contacted her lawyer's office and a friend that worked in the lawyer's office. That person, through our past dealings, contacted me and said, can you take a look at this and see if we can help Rosanna out or see who perpetrated this fraud against her.
I asked him questions about his church only because I had interest in it, and he answered all my questions. Every question I had, he answered. There was a Christ the King Cathedral, but there was no Pastor Benjamin Wallace, who this gentleman said he was.
It was very upsetting. Rosanna's an honest person. She's a hardworking person. Within her business, I know that she was struggling, and to deliver that type of news to a good person who's been victimized like that is very difficult and very upsetting.
And we called our insurance company. Our insurance company only covered $3,000 of it, and we're talking about $44,000.
There are no jurisdictions on the internet.
He would pick up the money and he would call me as soon as he picked it up. Thank you very much, I've picked up the money.
Consumers are simply gullible, you know, to the scams that are, you know, put upon them by someone who's looking, you know, to take advantage of them.
It's just not isolated to one person. It has a ripple effect in terms of other people and in terms of time.
And then I came back and I thought, you know what, this isn't going to get me down. We're not going to close the doors. My family's going to be fine, and we're just going to fight our way back.
Unfortunately, it happens all too often. Sometimes consumers are innocent, you know, sometimes consumers are simply gullible, you know, to the scams that are, you know, put upon them by someone who's looking, you know, to take advantage of them.
Officer Drum, he, you know, took a report, so at least now I had a police number, so that when I went to my wholesalers and said, look, I've ordered, you know, 300 baskets and 300 wreaths, this is what's happened, and I hopefully wouldn't get stuck for all that product. A lot of it was already shipped here, so it was already delivered, and a lot of it was food product, so that I was stuck with.
Because Rosanna never actually saw the credit cards and never witnessed the signature, she has no recourse. She's on the hook for all of the money lost.
The bank has closed our account, and they seized all the money that was in the account.
She counted on that money in order to run her business, to support her family, to pay her employees, who in turn were coming to work expecting to be paid. I remember being there on a payday, and Rosanna was extremely upset over the fact that she had to pay her staff, and the money wasn't there to do it. And she was trying her hardest to facilitate. So it's just not isolated to one person. It has a ripple effect in terms of other people and in terms of time.
I was a wreck for a couple of days. A lot of, like I say, a lot of lot of tears. I thought we were, at one point I even said, we're done, close the doors, we're done. And I had a little pity party, and then I came back and I thought, you know what, this isn't going to get me down. We're not going to close the doors. My family's going to be fine, and we're just going to fight our way back.
The local police knew that they simply could not get justice for Rosanna, so they advised her to take the story to the media.
As soon as she went public, my phone started ringing.
When the article was published, I emailed the article to a floral organization, and they posted it on their website. And I don't know how many emails they sent out, but I know how many phone calls I got.
And there was other victims that called that were almost victimized but weren't because of the fact that the story was carried. And one gentleman had contacted me, and he had gotten involved with the same people to the point where he had obtained money through stolen credit cards unwittingly. And the money was deposited in his bank account, and he was just about to wire it through to the individuals when he heard about Rosanna's story. And he immediately stopped the transaction at that point and was able to get the money back to the credit card companies.
I owe another $22,000, so it's still a hard pill to take, but that's where we're at now. A lot of tears, not wanting to get out of bed, but now I'm back, stronger than ever.